Welcome back to Andersen Acres. We are inside today with a bunch of seed packets because I wanted to answer a question someone asked me. Someone had asked, do I use a plant's common name or its botanical name? And honestly, the answer kind of depends, and frankly, botanical names can be a bit of a minefield. One, because they're not always indicated on your seed packets. Your plants sometimes have them, but may not. So when you buy seedlings, they may have it, but a lot of seed packets don't have it at all. But two, they can actually be a little bit intimidating and maybe even a turnoff for the beginner gardener because they can look complicated. Okay, they can look complicated, look tricky, and they are a little bit tricky sometimes. They can be surprising. They don't always make sense. So, for example, the black-eyed Susan that I like to grow, it actually is called Rudbeckia fulgida goldstrum. Is my favorite black-eyed Susan. There's actually 3 or 4 of them with different botanical names, but my favorite one is that one. Where does black-eyed Susan come from then? Black-eyed Susan is the common name, the name people gave to it because that's just what they decided to call it, but it's not its actual scientific name. So it can be difficult to figure out the botanical names and to get the right plant, especially like this seed packet doesn't actually tell you what the botanical name of these, this is columbine obviously, but it doesn't tell you what the botanical name is. Okay, it just tells you, well, that's what people call it. But it doesn't tell you what the genus or species is. So botanical names can be difficult, and sometimes you simply don't know unless you take a moment to look it up. But don't be intimidated. I know sometimes botanical names can turn a fun trip into to the garden center into a science lesson, but don't be intimidated. Common names are generally fine. So I am not going to go talk about the botanical name of this columbine when I'm talking to other gardeners about columbine. As long as we all know that this is what we're talking about, we're fine. We generally only have to use common names. Okay, as long as all parties involved in that discussion are using the same name for the same plant, it's fine. Even if you don't want to call this a columbine, it doesn't even matter. You could call it, I don't know, starburst if you wanted, even though that's a different plant. But it doesn't matter what you're calling it as long as everyone knows that the word you're using, so columbine refers to these dudes. Okay, as long as we all know that, everyone involved in the conversation, it doesn't matter what you call it. Okay, so it is one of those times when sometimes you just have to stop to clarify. So if you're not sure exactly what plant we're talking about, just ask. You know, if you're sitting in a group and everyone starts talking about black-eyed Susan and you're not sure which black-eyed Susan they're talking about, ask. You know, just ask for a moment of clarification and then join the discussion and move on. So generally they'll be talking about the black-eyed Susan that I mentioned, but there are other varieties. There's a vining variety. There's a couple of varieties. And they don't all have the same growing conditions. They don't always all have the same hardiness. So it's always better to ask. Very different plants can share the same common name. So when I say lilac, I know what I mean. Okay, I'm talking about the lilac bush that we have in the front. But not everybody means that when they say lilac because there's more than one type of lilac. Okay, so again, this is why you clarify. Just clarify the discussion. So botanical names do follow a pattern. There's the genus, the species, and then the cultivar or the variety name. Okay, so generally the thing we call it all the time is its cultivar name or its cultivated variety. Okay, so it's a variety. That is what we call things. This is a columbine. That's what we call it. Okay, that's just what we call it. So the genus and the species, so a black-eyed Susan, again, I'll use that as an example. A black-eyed Susan its genus is a Rudbeckia. Okay, it's from the Rudbeckia genus. Okay, then its species is the Fulgida. Okay, that is kind of its family. These are the related plants. There's more than one flower in the Fulgida group in the Flageola species. Then the cultivar, or the variety that I like to grow, is called the Goldstrom. All right, so it's the Rudbeckia flagella Goldstrom is its scientific botanical name, but calling it black-eyed Susan is fine. Okay, so the genus and the species divides groups of plants. It divides plants basically into groups that have similar significant features, botanical features specifically. So we don't divide every single plant, and we don't divide based on color. We don't divide based on how many petals you have. We don't do that. So it's important botanical features, not your color. It doesn't matter whether the flower is white or red or purple. That's not one of the defining characteristics of the genus and the species. That is one of the cultivar distinctions often, not always, but generally for genus and species, color doesn't matter. Cultivars, also called cultivated varieties or varieties, are unique versions of the plant created by breeders, researchers, or even just gardeners. Okay, so it is possible to create your own variety of a plant simply by cross-pollinating and selectively breeding your plants. Not all are cultivars. So, for example, the flowering dogwood does not have a cultivated variety. It's simply the Cornus florida. It does not have a third name at all. It doesn't need it because the cultivated variety specifically means somebody created it. Okay, so somebody went and said, oh, I'm going to take this columbine, and instead of having one columbine, we're going to have 10. Okay, so they didn't do that with dogwood. Nobody's done that with dogwood. You don't need to do that with dogwood. So flowering dogwood literally only has 2 names. It doesn't have a third. Some plants only use their genus and their cultivar in their name because they didn't necessarily bother to have another one. So, for example, autumn joy or sedum or autumn joy. Sorry, I'm having difficulty speaking. I'm also watching the puppy. Are you eating my lip gloss? Yes. Fine, whatever. I don't care. He's eating my lip gloss. So, some of them only have the genus and the cultivar, like sedum autumn joy. You don't need to know what the botanical names mean, okay? I don't care what they mean. I just sometimes need to know what the botanical name is so I can get the correct plant. So I can get the correct seed or I can get the correct seedling from the garden center. Sometimes I just need to know the botanical name. I don't care what it means. So you could care what it means. You could go and really research what each of all these names mean. Okay? So the seed packets, like I said, these 3 don't even have the scientific name at all. Okay, this one does. This one down here in the bottom tells you exactly what the scientific name is. Okay, it actually does tell you. So I'll just lift that up so you can see. So it does tell you there what that scientific name is, but the other ones don't. So sometimes when you're trying to get seed packets, you might have difficulty getting exactly what you're looking for. Especially, like I said, with black-eyed Susans, there's multiples. So sometimes you have to really study the picture and make sure it's what you want. So when you're buying seed packets, check the picture. Same with when you're buying seedlings. If they don't tell you the scientific name, you're going to want to really look at the picture of the adult plant just to make sure you're getting what you want. Okay? Common names are typically used. All right? If I go to the garden center, I ask for snapdragons. It doesn't matter what their botanical name is. I just want snapdragons. So I get snapdragons. If you are ordering plants or seeds online, you might want to know exactly what the botanical name is because that becomes important because you're ordering them online, sight unseen. So then you might have to actually ask what is the botanical name just to avoid ending up with the entirely wrong plants. So that is a time you're going to want to look up the exact botanical name and then confirm with your supplier because you're not even seeing the plant or the seeds before you get them. Okay, so double check in that way. Otherwise, for the most part, you don't need to use the botanical name. Okay, it's good that you can look it up if you need to. That's what the internet's for. but you don't need to use the botanical name every day. So that is really about it for botanical names versus common names. Go ahead and use the common name. It's fine. Only the most stuck-up people care if you're using the botanical name versus using the common name. So use the common name. It's fine. We're not going to worry about it. So that's about it for us here today at Andersen Acres. We'll see you tomorrow.